Welcome to Betrayal Stories. Take a breath, get comfortable, and settle into the moment. Because what we're about to talk about may reshape the way you think about connection, communication, and the patterns people reveal without ever saying a single word. Let's start with a simple but powerful question. Have you ever noticed someone who never initiates the conversation? Never reaches out first, never starts the interaction, yet somehow they never fully disappear either. They don't step forward, but they don't step away. They don't chase you, but they don't lose you. They respond, but they don't initiate. They show up, but never with effort. For many people, this dynamic feels confusing. It feels like an emotional riddle, something you try to decode, something you try to interpret like a hidden message. You start wondering, are they shy? Are they busy? Are they unsure? Or are they simply taking the connection for granted because you're always the one keeping it alive? But what if their silence is not random at all? What if their lack of initiation is not an accident? Not an oversight, not a flaw in the connection, but instead a direct reflection of their mindset, and even more importantly, a mirror showing something about yours. Because here's the truth. When someone never makes the first move, they're revealing a dynamic that most people overlook. And unless you respond with clarity, strength, and grounded self-respect, you will find yourself chasing while they remain comfortably passive. Today, you're going to learn the 6 shifts you must make when someone consistently avoids taking the first step. 6 psychological adjustments that flip the power dynamic, reveal true intentions, and put you back in control of your emotional life. Before we dive into the first shift, I want you to pause for just a moment and ask yourself something honestly. How many times have you lowered your own needs just to keep a connection alive? How many times have you taken responsibility for both sides of the communication because it felt safer than acknowledging someone wasn't meeting you halfway? How often have you carried the weight of a relationship dynamic because the thought of losing the person felt heavier than the burden of doing everything yourself? If you've ever found yourself in that place, understand this. You're not weak, not desperate, and you're not broken. You're human. And humans crave connection, sometimes so much that we accept less effort from others than we accept from ourselves. But this moment right here, right now, is where you stop running from your own truth. It's the moment where you stop bending yourself to fit someone else's lack of effort. It's where you reclaim your position in the connection, not through force, not through manipulation, but through awareness, confidence, and grounded self-respect. If you're ready for that shift, hit that like button, subscribe, and settle in. Because what you're about to learn isn't just advice. It's a reset button, a recalibration, a return to your center. Now let's begin with the first shift you need to make if you want to change this pattern for good. The first shift is simple, it's powerful, and often the hardest to execute. Stop rewarding silence. When someone never reaches out first, most people fall into the same trap. They try to fill the silence for them. They assume that if they just give a little more, stay consistent long enough, or try a little harder, the other person will eventually reciprocate. But the opposite happens. The more you compensate for someone else's lack of effort, the more you teach them that your presence requires nothing from them. You train them unintentionally that your attention, your messages, your time, and your emotional labor are guaranteed. Picture this scenario. You wake up, check your phone, and see nothing from them, not even a simple good morning. You feel slightly uneasy, so you decide to initiate again. You send something small, maybe something thoughtful, maybe something light. And eventually they respond, short, predictable, minimal. The next day, the same thing happens. And the day after that? Before long, you have built a routine where they contribute nothing, yet remain present enough to keep you hooked. They don't grow closer, but they don't drift away either. And without realizing it, you've trained them that effort is optional. The psychology is simple. Human beings don't appreciate what they don't have to work for. When something is endlessly available, it stops feeling special. And when someone receives effort without offering any in return, the value of that effort declines. That's why the first shift requires restraint. Don't text because silence makes you anxious. Don't call because you're afraid of losing connection. Don't check in just to reassure yourself that they still care. Let the silence exist, not as punishment, not as a strategy, not as manipulation, but as truth. Your attention is a currency. And when you spend it freely on someone who invests nothing, you bankrupt its worth. Silence gains power only when you stop trying to fill it. It becomes noticeable, meaningful, revealing. It shows you whether the other person steps forward when you step back. And if they don't, that absence holds the clarity you've been avoiding. Silence only becomes loud when you stop covering it with your effort. Second shift. Match their energy. Most people don't lose a connection because they're too kind or too genuine. They lose it because they continue giving long after the other person stops meeting them halfway. Connection requires reciprocity, rhythm, balance, a mutual flow of initiation. When one person is sprinting while the other is strolling, the imbalance doesn't stay invisible. It becomes the entire dynamic. Imagine someone sends 4 messages throughout the day. Little jokes, check-ins, thoughtful notes. Hours pass. The other person replies, maybe once, maybe twice. Short messages with no questions, no curiosity, no intention to keep the conversation alive. Instead of noticing the imbalance, the giver convinces themselves that consistency will fix it. They think that if they keep proving they care, the other person will eventually match the energy. But what the receiver feels isn't admiration, it's pressure. It's being pursued without contributing. It's one-sided emotional labor masquerading as connection. And that's where problems begin. Because overcompensation doesn't come from strength. It comes from fear. Fear of losing them. Fear that if you stop trying, they'll disappear. Fear that your effort is the glue holding the connection together. And fear-based effort always feels like neediness, even when your intentions are pure. People can sense when someone is pursuing from confidence and when someone is pursuing from insecurity. And nothing dissolves attraction and respect faster than someone who tries to earn what should flow naturally. Connection is like a dance. It's not about one person taking all the steps. If one partner does all the moving, all the initiating, all the leading, it ceases to be a dance. It becomes emotional dragging. The shift you need is simple. Mirror their investment. If they reach out, you respond with warmth. If they contribute effort, you meet them there. But if they go cold, you don't heat up to compensate. Matching energy is not about being cold. It's about dignity. It's about clarity. It's about allowing someone's behavior to reveal their truth without you trying to distort it with your effort. If they're genuinely interested, they will show it once the pressure is removed. If they're not, their lack of effort becomes undeniable. Clarity is the gift, even when it hurts. Third shift. Reclaim your emotional control. There's a moment almost everyone has lived at some point, that quiet anxiety right after you send a message. You wait for the response like your emotions are hanging on a thin thread. You check your phone more than you want to admit. If they reply quickly, you feel relieved. If they take hours or don't reply at all, your mood drops, your confidence falters, and your mind spirals with questions that shouldn't even exist in a healthy dynamic. And suddenly, your emotional state isn't yours anymore. It's in their hands, tied to their timing, tied to their consistency, tied to their attention. That loss of control doesn't stay hidden. People feel it. They hear the subtle urgency in your tone, the underlying need for validation, the unspoken hope that their message will stabilize your emotions. And the moment someone realizes they are the center of your emotional balance, something shifts. Attraction, respect, and reciprocity begin to fade. Not because the person is cruel, but because emotional dependence never feels like strength. Imagine someone sitting at a desk pretending to focus. Every notification triggers a reaction. Every silence feels like a threat. They tell themselves they just want to check something, but they're really checking for emotional reassurance. The deeper truth is this: their reply is information, not validation. It tells you something about their investment, not your value. And once you internalize that, your entire energy changes. Reclaiming emotional control doesn't mean pretending not to care. It means refocusing your attention on your own life, your goals, your passions, your friendships, your growth. It means refusing to let a message or a lack of one dictate your self-worth. When you stop obsessing over replies, something powerful happens. Your presence becomes grounded again. Your confidence stops fluctuating. Your mind becomes clear. Ironically, that's when people start leaning toward you again, because you're no longer tethered to their attention like an emotional lifeline. You stand independently, confidently, unshaken by silence. Control your emotions, or they will control how you are seen. Fourth shift, let absence do the work. Most people believe they lose someone by pulling back. The truth is, they often lose them because they never do. When you're always available, always initiating, always filling the space. The other person never gets to feel your presence, and because of that, they never feel your absence either. Without absence, there's no contrast. Without contrast, there's no value. Imagine eating your favorite food every single day. No matter how much you loved it at first, it would eventually lose its spark. Not because the food changed, but because the frequency did. Too much presence kills appreciation. This applies to attention, effort, emotional availability. Overexposure dulls desire. Picture someone who constantly sends messages, updates, check-ins, reassurances. They believe they're nurturing connection, but they're flooding it. They're oversaturating the emotional space. They're leaving no room for curiosity, no room for wondering, no room for longing. The other person doesn't have time to miss anything because nothing ever goes missing. When you allow absence to exist, natural, healthy absence, something important happens. Clarity rises to the surface. If they value you, they lean in. If they don't, their silence grows. Not because you caused it, but because you finally stopped covering it. Letting absence work is not manipulation. It's balance. You're not withdrawing to punish. You're stepping back to recalibrate. To return to a healthy baseline where your effort isn't being poured endlessly into someone who gives very little in return. When you pull back, the other person finally feels the difference. They notice the missing message. They feel the shift in the dynamic. They sense the change. And if they genuinely care, they move toward you. People cannot miss what never leaves. Give space, not as a strategy, but as truth. Let absence reveal what presence once hid. Fifth shift, test their interest, not through games, but through truth. There's a specific kind of dynamic that traps many people. The situation where the other person never initiates, but always responds. Not with enthusiasm, not with effort, but with just enough presence to keep you uncertain. They don't disappear, but they don't pursue. They don't invest, but they don't let go. And because they remain in this gray zone, you convince yourself there's something meaningful there. So you keep carrying the connection. You keep initiating. You keep planning. You keep doing all the heavy lifting. And you're left wondering, are they interested or are they just entertained? This is where you need clarity. Because as long as you compensate for their lack of effort, you will never know the truth. They don't need to show interest because you're showing enough for both of you. So here's what testing interest really means. Stop initiating. Stop carrying the connection. Stop being the only source of movement. Not as punishment, not as manipulation. Not to play hard to get, but to observe. To see what happens when you stop fueling the dynamic. Do they reach out? Do they close the distance? Do they check on you? Or do they let silence sit comfortably as if your absence doesn't cost them anything? Their reaction, or lack of one, is the truth you've been avoiding. If they care, they'll show it. If they don't, the silence won't bother them. And that silence is your freedom. You're not losing someone. You're losing the illusion of what you hoped they were. If a connection dies the moment you stop carrying it, it was never alive to begin with. Let their actions answer the question you keep trying to interpret. Sixth shift. Raise your standards. At some point, the issue stops being their lack of effort. The issue becomes the level of behavior you've allowed yourself to tolerate. Lowering your standards does not build connection, it builds resentment. When you accept minimal investment, when you cling to someone who gives you little, when you explain away their lack of effort, you aren't acting out of love. You're acting out of fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of starting over. Fear that maybe this is the best you'll get. And those fears quietly convince you to accept crumbs and call it connection. But here's a truth many avoid. A person without standards becomes a person without options. When you tolerate neglect, you train yourself to believe that's all you deserve. You shrink your expectations to match their inconsistency. You downgrade your emotional worth to match their minimal investment. Raising your standards isn't about demanding more from others, it's about demanding more from yourself. It's about refusing to stay in a connection that survives only because you're resuscitating it. It's about choosing peace over potential. It's about accepting that the right person won't need to be convinced to care. Your standards filter out the people who only stay when the effort is one-sided. And as soon as you raise them, something powerful happens. The wrong people drift away, and the right ones step forward effortlessly. Because genuine connection doesn't require begging, convincing, or chasing. It requires mutual effort, mutual interest, and mutual respect. And anyone who wants a place in your life will show you through. Action, not ambiguity. You've now walked through a journey. Most people never take because it forces you to face something uncomfortable. How much of yourself you've given away in dynamics where the other person gave very little. And if you've made it this far, you are already ahead of the version of yourself who once stayed up waiting for a message that never came. This isn't about fixing someone else. It's about understanding yourself.